Hello, my astrology family. This is Lada from astrolada.com. Today I'm here with my friend and amazing astrologer Kesenya. Hello, Kesenya.
Hi, Lada. Lovely to be with you.
Lovely to see you with this beautiful love background, oh pink. And of course, today we're talking about relationships and love. Kesenya is going to present to us some fascinating research that she's done, working with clients as well, how to time relationships, meeting of a partner. Is that what it is?
Yes, yes. I've releasing a webinar all about the astrological timing of relationships. When will love come?
When will love
We
come?
all,
But
yeah.
what do people need to know in order to take that webinar? Because it's going to be on the Astrolab website. It's on the Astrolab website. There is a link below. It's a 4-hour webinar of timing of relationships. Do people need to know the basics of astrology?
They will need to know the basics of astrology for this one. We do look at a number of different triggers in the course, where we look at progressions, transits. We dive a bit into perfections and all those sorts of things. So having a bit of a base knowledge of those bits and pieces is really important. But I feel that the webinar is actually it's best suited for people who want to perhaps become astrologers themselves. And I know there's a lot of aspiring astrologers on your site, Lada, because the number one question that astrologers get asked is, when will love come? I mean, if I wish I had $1 for every time I've been asked that question. I'd be rich. Because it's true. I mean, that's one of the main motivations that we'll see a lot of people in the beginning, at least, come to astrology and take a dive into astrology as relationship stuff. So yeah, this is a very great, very helpful webinar for people who want to be able to answer that question for clients in the future. And perhaps if you're a hobby astrologer, you've got friends who want to know those sorts of things, or you might just want to know for yourself. So it's a webinar designed to help people do that. Like as they say, you can give a man a fish, or give a person a fish, and they'll eat for a day, or you can teach a person to fish and they'll be able to eat for a lifetime. So it's kind of that premise, teaching people how to see these things in an astrology chart. I actually, Lada, I feel that I'm not so much destined to be the great YouTube celebrity astrologer, but more of a teacher. That's what I see my role as. And so I love to teach about astrology and help people to understand their charts better and see things in the chart. So I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited. You have 2 other beautiful courses with us as well. One is about multiple marriages. If there is indications in your horoscope that you marry more than once, and what the next marriages will be like. If you want to check that course of Kesenya, she's really amazing at relationships. And then she has another webinar on Vedic techniques for Western astrologers by using the Western she takes the ancient Vedic techniques and makes them very easy to understand for Western astrologers who also use tropical zodiac. So these 2 fascinating webinars. And now this 3rd one comes. When will I? When
will love come?
When will love come?
Yeah. Well, when I did the Astrology of Many Marriages webinar, which is the first webinar I ever did years ago, I promised people back then that there would be a follow-up webinar looking at the timing of when relationship would come, not just looking at the chart and saying, do I have the capacity to have more than one relationship? But this webinar is all about, well, if I do have the capacity, when's it going to happen? When are the stars going to align, basically?
But people
So
can
it's a
take it
follow-up
without knowing the previous webinar as well. So it's, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a standalone webinar for sure.
So can you lead us to some important points of how?
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. That's probably a really good thing to look at. I mean, people might say, you mentioned a moment ago, Kesenya does really good relationship stuff, but Kesenya's a single woman. She's actually not that good at relationships. So people might ask, what are you doing, teaching about relationships in the horoscope? But the thing is, you don't actually, well, I don't feel that you actually have to be in a relationship to have a big fascination with the topic. And I'm part of the Pluto in Libra generation. It's actually part of our soul journey as Pluto in Libra people to understand ourselves through the context of relationships and all the intricacies and the difficulties. And we're learning, Pluto in Libra generation people, we're learning balance. Libra, learning to balance our lives and ourselves and our soul's journey through finding equal relationship and learning how to do equality in relationship. And that doesn't come easily. So there's a lot of testing and trialing and what have you. And in my case, I love to observe and read. And I have, it's very interesting actually. My chart is very powerful for singleness, you know, and I like to term it that way because it's not a bad thing to be geared towards autonomy or a single life. You know, people sort of paint that as quite a negative thing, but it's not a bad thing. I actually love it. And truth be told, Lada, you are the only astrologer who's ever done a reading for me, who's called it as it is and said, hey, look, your chart's pretty difficult for relationship there, Kesenya. And so I am so grateful to you for that reading that you did for me years ago.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. It was great because I knew astrology and I knew that it was difficult for relationship, but I didn't want the BS, you know, about my chart. I wanted the truth, as a lot of people do. And you were able to sort of say it in a beautiful, gentle way, as is your nature, to point out the difficulties. So I appreciated that. And I think singleness is not a bad thing, but this is, I mean, that's getting a bit off the topic here. Yeah, I think one of the things that's really important is that we look at our chart and we see the potential, you know. Okay, so even though I've had a lot of singleness in my life, the majority of my life I have been single, even despite that chart, I've still had a 10-year marriage, you know, and I've got 3 children, and that has still occurred. So you're never in, like, mine's one of the worst charts for relationships that I've ever seen. So you're never going to, you can't write yourself off, let's say, and say it's never going to happen to me, because what we're looking at in this course is the stars aligning. And if the stars align to say, hey, yeah, love is coming your way, you will experience it. So I like to think of myself as a poster girl for a crap relationship horoscope that is still able to experience love and to experience relationship, which was definitely the case in my life. So
whenever I had the most difficult relationships, that's when I've learned the most about relationships as an astrologer. So I think actually the best person to go consult about a relationship is someone who's gone through the hard parts, because that's what threw me into researching astrology and deep. Every time I had relationship issues, and I've had a lot of those, I'll just study, investigate charts, find new techniques, ancient techniques. And I've done my best work on relationships when I had relationship issues. Since my relationships are much more stable now, since I married 4 or 5 years ago, I've kind of abandoned this because I'm like, okay, now things are good. I'm not interested, and I've lost my edge there, you know.
But that's so true, because it's our difficulties that cause us to seek the answers. And that's, you know, people who are having health issues will come to astrology looking for an answer in their chart. People who are having career and money issues, look, where's the answer in my chart? And that's why we come to astrology. So relationships was, like you, one of the difficulties I had with relationship triggered me into the pursuit of astrology when I got divorced. So yeah, there's a beauty in our trials, I guess, to help awaken our mind and expand our minds. So,
the best astrologers are single, basically. Even my teacher told
there's a lot.
She said, like,
there's a lot of us.
Best work when I was single and alone.
Yeah. It's true. Well, you also have more time to pursue astrology when you're single. it's interesting, isn't it? Because just because you are in a relationship doesn't mean that it's happy, doesn't mean that it's a good situation to be in. So even if you are in a relationship, you can still be drawn to astrology to find answers for why is this so difficult, you know.
That was the case for me, because I've been in relationships since 17, like a monkey, from one branch to another. I never stay. But it's even more painful to be in a relationship you're not happy. I don't know why I did this to myself, but it's the same as if you're single and unhappy, or it's even more painful actually being in a relationship and unhappy, because you have to deal with, not one. But anyway, let's dive into the topic. Give us some clues what you've discovered.
Well, a lot of what I talk about in the course is based on the premise that you need more than one trigger or activation to occur in order for love to come into your life. There are many sort of times in life when you'll get an activation that is geared towards bringing relationship in. That happens a lot, actually. There's 62 main triggers that will activate the energy of relationship in a person's chart. And that's a lot of triggers, and they occur on a fairly regular basis. But you need more than just one happening at once. If you get one trigger for relationship occurring in your chart, then you probably start thinking about relationships a lot more, or you might decide you're going to get on some dating app, you know, and give it a go, see what happens, because the energy for relationship is stirred up within you, in your psyche, in your desire sphere, so to speak. But then when you have, say, two triggers happening at once, then you might start suddenly getting a lot more dates. You might start meeting people. You might, have a couple of week-long relationships, and things get moving all the more. But it's when we have three or more of these 62 main triggers, and there are others as well, but there's 62 main ones. When we have three or more of these occurring at the one time, boom, that's when the serious stuff comes in. That's when relationships really take on a more committed flavor and a long-term flavor. Like I said, my chart's crap for relationships. But when I was 23, I had, there was 4 different triggers happened at the same time within 1 week of one another. And that was the week that I met my now ex-husband, and we were together for 10 years. So it was just such a traffic light beacon for me. And I haven't had a repeat in my life of that amount of activation since then. So no surprises there. But perhaps we could look at, so it's rare to have 3 or 4 triggers happening at once, but maybe we might be able to look at good relationships and difficult relationships and the trigger for those sorts of things, because perhaps I need to step back a little bit. When we have some triggers, they bring the energy of relationship or amplify the energy of relationship in our life, but they don't necessarily indicate whether the relationship's going to be for our highest good or whether it's going to be a challenge and difficult. That isn't often shown. But there are some triggers in this 62 trigger lot that will tell us, well, the relationship's going to be a bit more this way, or the relationship's going to be a bit more that way. So perhaps we could look at these triggers for good and bad relationships, and they're seen by the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And when they make an aspect to either Venus, the planet of love and relationships, or when they make an aspect to the 7th house lord, the ruler of your 7th house in the chart. So maybe we could have a look at the good and bad aspects of those 3 celestial planets. And these are triggers, but keep in mind, you need more than just these triggers happening to bring relationship into your life. You need 3 or more. So maybe we'll start with the bad news first. We'll go to the difficult ones. So with Uranus, like if you have Uranus making a square aspect or an opposition to Venus or your 7th house lord, then you'll tend to bring into your life, and you will attract people, because it's still a trigger for relationships coming in. You'll attract people though that are very detached, maybe eccentric, unstable, maybe a bit volatile, maybe people with big age gaps, big age differences to you. That, I mean, that might be good or bad depending on your perspective. And you might also bring in people who are very different to you culturally in a way that's challenging or confronting for you. And there's this intense desire that comes when you've got this trigger as part of your little, let's say, bag of 3 activations happening. Let's call it a bag of ticks, perhaps, a tick for all your triggers, as I refer to it. I hope that makes sense to people. You need 3 ticks in your bag of ticks for relationship triggers. And so there's intense desire with this Uranus transit by square or opposition, but the relationships are very unlikely to last. And so they'll shake you up, shake you out of a rut, maybe for not such good reasons. That can be the case. But yeah, they'll change you. And the purpose of Uranus is always to liberate us from our old beliefs and old habits and what have you. But it'll do it in a difficult way when it is through relationships, when it's making those oppositions. And so the next
this is great.
outer planet,
when I had Uranus opposing a planet in my 7th house, my moon, I was 21 and I met someone who was 55 and we were dating. That's huge age difference. I never told my parents, but we lived even for like 5-6 months. The weirdest, how could I ever, when you think about it, super weird.
I know.
Out of the blue, super unusual. I can't even say the circumstances were crazy. Everything was so unusual and out of whack. Yeah. But yeah.
And did you find that liberated you in any way, Lada, with your, I don't know, attitudes or relationship experiences in any way? Did Uranus liberate you through that?
It took me out of a drug addiction. So that
wow,
liberating. So maybe this person helped me in a way, but it never lasted, So yeah, it was liberating.
But it did,
in the sense, yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Wow, that's such an amazing story. You have an incredible life, Lada. You really do.
I've almost kind of locked a big part of my past. I don't. Yeah.
And if your parents didn't know about it before, they will now when they watch this video.
Glad they don't know English.
Well, let's move on and look at Neptune. When it makes a square or an opposition to Venus or the 7th house, it brings uncertainty. The 7th house lord, I should just clarify that, brings uncertainty and confusion into love, and you kind of like, you don't know whether you're coming or going. We have a show in Australia, it may be in other parts of the world, I don't know, called Farmer Wants a Wife, and I swear half these guys have got Neptune square or opposition happening in their life, because they get 5 women that they take home to their family farm, and they've got, maybe 6 weeks with them on the farm, and then they've got to try and decide which one they want. And they're all in a state of confusion, and it's, one of those terrible reality TV shows, but they're all confused, and they don't know which one to choose, and one moment they like this one, and one moment they like that one. I swear they're all having some sort of Neptune transit.
We have it here in the States. It's called it's like one man and 40 women, The Bachelor. They probably have Neptune Venus, you're right.
Probably. But I swear this Farmer Wants a Wife one in Australia, I keep telling myself it's a community service. These farmers are out in the middle of nowhere. They never meet any women. It needs to happen. But yes, they're probably, highly confused for a lot of the program. And Neptune square or opposition can make you feel restless for love, sensitive and vulnerable to feelings of love as well. But like I said, loss of clarity, a loss of discrimination, loss of objectivity regarding love with this one. But you may also, if you have this particular trigger happening in your bag of ticks, you might experience opportunities that seem too good to be true, and they usually will be. So be aware. This is where it's helpful to know what's going on in your chart, so you can, be forewarned and forearmed, as we say. You might attach yourself to unavailable people, people who are married, people who, you know, have an affair with someone who won't leave their partner for you. Martyring yourself for somebody else is another thing. Having relationships with deceitful and dishonest people. These are the, like, Neptune hard aspects are pretty yucky, really. I don't know what purpose they serve, unlike Uranus transits.
No, I had
Yeah.
Neptune opposition after Uranus. A few years later, I had Neptune opposition the moon in the seventh house. And I fell in love like never before. I actually first started with craving. I want to fall in love like a fairy tale, like a fairy tale. And I fall in love and I'm like, it's too good to be true. I've never felt like you fly, you're on cloud nine. 3 months later, I find out he's married. And I was in love with him for 9 more years. I couldn't shake it off. It
Oh,
was a nightmare.
yeah.
So you are
And
so, even though you see it's not the right thing and you can't help it and your feelings are going there, it's like, and Neptune sucks, you can't do anything against it. You're right, I couldn't to this day I don't understand what the purpose of this was. It's like
that's
like
right.
paying off a karmic debt from past lifetime. I don't know what else it is.
Possibly. And Neptune is intense longing. Like it
Mm-hmm.
it just puts this ache and desire for something that we don't have in us, and it's just so painful.
Yeah.
Neptune hard aspects. Let's move on to another planet. To another planet that gives really a lot of difficulty with hard aspects, and this is a Pluto square or opposition Venus, or the seventh house lord, and it just gives an intense hunger for intimacy. You just want to bond with someone, but there's always a cost with a square from Pluto or an opposition from Pluto. So it brings partners that we tend to choose to be with based on their sexual appeal and how hot they are and that sort of thing, and often they might be lacking some substance, but that chemistry that we all want to have is so powerful and so intense that we sometimes overlook the fact that there mightn't be much substance, and it's just all about the big muscles or the, I don't know, sexy smile or whatever, other things too. But these Pluto transits give erotic, turbulent kind of relationships, and again, they're not often long-lasting when Pluto is doing this. So there's a loss of objectivity with these ones as well, and invariably there will be an experience of rejection. So you know, you might have to do the rejecting, which is like something I hate. I've been on quite a few dates over the last couple of years, and having to tell people no thanks very much is just heartbreaking. My Pisces rising just can't stand that, you know. But that's part of this Pluto opposition. You might have to do the rejecting, or you might be rejected, and it's pretty intense, pretty difficult. Those ones. Do you have any Pluto transit love affairs?
Having it since 1 year. Last year Pluto squared the ruler of the seventh house. This year Pluto square Venus. I've been jealous. I'm never jealous. My husband goes away to the garage and I'm like, is he texting someone? It's like, it's such kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's like yeah, and
and you can't control it, can you? It's like, it's just there.
yeah.
I think
It's like,
the only way to deal with Pluto stuff is often to just detach and observe. Okay, I'm feeling jealous. What is my jealousy telling me? You know,
that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, it's very
you
internal.
absolutely,
I'm not
you
sure
can't fight it.
a jealousy, but I know people that are going through that. They're following or tapping their partners, or their partners spying on them, and some kind of
Wow.
jealousy situations, or you attract someone that there is like a great power struggle with for domination and control and such kind of topics as well. And it's very much about, I've learned, it's about taking your power back and not allowing someone to destabilize you emotionally, or even in some extreme cases maybe abuse you verbally, emotionally, physically, psychologically. And if you don't know how to do that, you first usually go through a period when when your power is taken away, whether you lose control over your emotions, or the situation in the relationship, but then the ultimate goal is to not to give your power away to such strong feelings or to someone else, to learn to control it, to learn to ride that emotional wave. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah. Well, if anyone is having one of these transits coupled with any of the other 62 transits, then you need to be conscious and aware of this element and that will be present in a relationship that comes in, you know. I just find this is where the beauty of astrology to me, Lada, is just knowing gives you so much more power, understanding, okay, this relationship has this dynamic because of this, and therefore, okay, I'll know how to deal with this better, you know. To be forewarned and forearmed gives us, yeah, so much more insight. And if we realize we've got to learn to take our power back as a part of this particular experience, then we actually make efforts towards, okay, I'm going to put appropriate boundaries in place, or I'm going to say no to this and really stand my ground. And we learn to take our power back, and we can do that quicker when we've got the knowledge of astrology
You know what
behind
the
us.
purpose of it is, it so you're like, okay, you know. And I was thinking about Neptune, but Neptune has its beautiful side, because I've never felt the ability. It showed to me depths of feeling I never knew I existed, like unconditional love, even though you know someone's not gonna return the love, or it's not going to be equal. You despite of that, you give and you love, and the sense of yearning that carried on for years. I would just idealize yearn. It gave me a lot of creative stimulus to actually, I wanted to 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 become successful because of that. Maybe I'll win his love one, and maybe he would notice me with this yearning. And it's like,
oh, that's so Neptune, isn't it?
Yeah, he was this guy I could not have. He was my muse, and I'll just daydream about him and whatever. So it has its purpose. I'm sure we all need those things. Just not it's
yeah.
not fun always.
No, but these challenging times, they stretch us and they grow us as souls, don't they? Maybe we'll look at the good aspects now. the joyful stuff. We'll come to the good news. So the same kind of principle applies, but this time we're looking at the outer planets making sextile aspects, trine, and even conjunction as well. And so when Uranus is doing this to Venus, or the seventh house Lord, it will bring sudden infatuations and exciting relationships. Again, though, they can be short-lived. I mean, unless Saturn is involved in some way by an aspect, or Saturn's involved making another trigger happen in the chart, then it's likely that the relationship won't last. But they will, it's still designed to beneficially shake you out of a rut relationally, or with your attitudes or something like that. So it's very, very powerful for good, though. It'll feel good. It won't feel like this sucks and why did I have to go through this? It'll be like, yeah, that was so empowering and so liberating. I've got a client who recently had a sextile from Uranus to her Venus, actually. And she had years and years of tumbleweed city when it came to relationships. No dates, nothing happening. And then Uranus sextiled her Venus, and she didn't have all the other triggers happening as well. She only had the one, but it was enough to bring her a lot of attention on dating apps, and she was going out for dinners and being romanticized. And it really did shake her out of a rut of, oh, nobody's interested in me. There's no good men out there, blah, blah, blah. So Uranus has this beautiful power, like I said before, to liberate us. And in this sense, when it makes a kindly aspect, it's going to do it in a way that feels good, in a way that enhances our lives. So I love Uranus. He's my favorite, one of my favorites.
When Uranus was transiting my sun, exactly, I met my husband, and the sun rules my seventh house of relationships. And it was like a lightning struck me. And it shook me off of a relationship that I was not in love with, and I was married. And I was like, I saw the truth. How could I have lied to myself? and it stayed. And he had, my husband, when I met him, he had Uranus conjunct transit the seventh house cusp, exactly. But
wow,
but you know, it was so unusual, such an unusual relationship, because I was an astrologer. He's never met a foreigner, first of all, let alone someone from the other end of the world who is an astrologer. That's very Iranian. And
Yeah.
and for me, it brought a divorce and a marriage quickly in 6 months.
Yeah. Because Uranus does rule divorce as well,
Yeah.
and it rules things that happen suddenly, so and out of the blue. So can I ask what other transits were occurring for you when you met Matt?
My husband has already Uranus trine Venus in his natal chart and trine the seventh house cusp. So when Uranus transited there, it trined his Venus perfectly, conjunct his seventh house cusp, and trine his Uranus. So there was a promise in his horoscope that he will be with an unusual woman already. So they triggered it and I stayed. But if he didn't have this promise, I might have just, just sweep his world around, change everything for a year and disappear. But it stayed. And for me, that was the aspect that was happening. And let me think.
But you've just illustrated how important it is to know your natal chart and what the potential of your natal chart is too, coupled with all of this as well. Yeah.
That was all for me. It was Uranus on the sun, the rule of the seventh house. And I had Jupiter in the seventh house of the solar return chart that year. Okay. That's
that'll do it.
In the seventh of the solar return.
Plus, and I hope you don't mind me sharing about your chart, but you also have the North Node in the seventh house, and that makes relationships happen more easily, I would say, for people with those sorts of placements in their natal chart that indicate that relationships are a big part of their soul journey. They're going to get more of them. Rahu in the seventh house is hungry, wants more. Let me try more relationships. So if your natal, this is where this sort of three energies at once is really works. But you've also got to know the context of your own relationship your own chart for relationships. And so you have this natural, I'm going to say ease with having relationships, but then a lot of people don't, and they will need that 3 or more triggers. But 2 was obviously enough to get you and Matt over the line
as well. Eclipse on my Jupiter. Jupiter is the marriage. So there were 3.
Yes.
It happened within a week. Uranus conjunct the sun, eclipse on my Jupiter, which is husband, and solar return chart where Jupiter is in the 7th house the whole year of that year.
Yeah, fantastic. When I met my ex-husband, we had an eclipse on, because our ascendants are practically the same. We're both Pisces rising, and we had an eclipse on our ascendant. We had ascendant descendant. The week before we met, I had progressed new moon happen, and Jupiter was aspecting the 7th house, and there was one other that escapes me now from recollection as well, but it was it's gone, but it was very significant. All these energies that are big players at once. And
it's
good stuff.
All the 63 triggers that can 63
sorry,
in the course you teach all those 62.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we go through all of them, and what they tend to bring and what manner. So they're all covered. So if you want to know, what to look for that's going to trigger it, this is the course. But Neptune, when Neptune makes a conjunction, a trine, or a sextile to Venus or the 7th house lord, it's a trigger that can bring that beautiful, sublime, tender, fairy tale like love experiences. There is still with Neptune the possibility of not seeing things clearly, but this fairy tale energy is a beautiful thing, like you described with the partner that you had, who was that was the older partner. No, it was another relationship, wasn't it? Uranus.
The one that I found out that was there was like that.
That's right. So so when you've got an easy aspect of Neptune to these points, then you get that fairy tale, you get that unconditional love feeling and the euphoria. Neptune's actually quite a sexualized planet, actually. I've recently been reading a lot about this planet. This month is Neptunalia, the ancient celebration of Neptune. So checking out all that sort of information. But yeah, there's this sexual element to Neptune, but it's much more detached kind of sexuality. Anyhow, that's another whole other topic I won't go into now. Yeah, but there's this, it's an unconditionally giving planet, unconditionally loving planet that's very, very beautiful and ethereal. So you get a bit of that. And sometimes soulmate love can come when Neptune easy aspect is triggering your chart as well. Now, when Pluto conjuncts, trines, or sextiles your natal placement of Venus or the seventh house lord, it tends to bring in positive relationships. They will still be deep, intense, very sexually oriented, but there's substance to it. There's depth, there's meaning in the relationship. Very transformative relationships as well that come with this one. And it's almost a bit the positive scorpionic side. You know, I always see Scorpio as a sign that it's very, people say, oh yeah, Scorpio is very sexualized, but it's a sexualized sign as the path to God, as the path to divinity, like tantra kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so a Pluto easy aspect like this will tend to trigger that kind of experience, that tantric experience of the divine through intense emotion, intense physicality, just depth, which is beautiful. Like, yeah, it's full on. It's really full on, but it's a great contributor to triggering relationship in your chart. So that's the look at the celestial planets, Lada, and how they influence relationships when they trigger things. So I love the celestial planets. I find them quite captivating when it comes to relationships.
Planets, me too. I'm fascinated by them. But this is just transits. There is like progressions and solar returns, that there are different activations, and of course, like you said, eclipses. They're the big, really big ones when they trigger something. Those years, like your marriage.
Very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I think eclipses also bring about karmic relationships too, because they involve the South Node, don't they? So that's the South Node is the past moving forward into the future. So they're usually always relationships with people that we may have done past lives with, and something needs to be resolved, or we need to we're souls that want to tango again in this lifetime. So there's that beautiful element there. Did you feel a familiarity with Matt when you met him?
No, I had an eclipse with the North Node, Rahu, and he had the eclipse on his ascendant, close. So for us, it's like brand new. It's I met my previous husband on a South Node eclipse on my ascendant or something like that.
Yep.
And that's it felt like I've known him for a long time. There was but with my current husband, it feels very brand new. Very exciting.
Yeah.
It's like it's hard to fizzle out still, because it feels so new, so different. Like maybe we meet the first time. I don't know. Now he feels more familiar, but at the beginning, no.
But even like the North Node is creating future karma. So that's what the North Node's all about. So that's what you're doing. It's all karmic relationships when eclipses are involved. So I love seeing eclipses triggering relationships when I do readings for people on that topic. But in the course, we look at eclipses, we look at perfections, progressions, we look at the transit triggers, we look at solar return charts, we look at planetary maturation, we look at planetary returns that can trigger relationship. And I also take a bit of a peek into just a little bit into the dashes and the ninth divisional or the ninth harmonic chart, which is the chart of the soulmate, or what the energy we're trying to become as souls in this lifetime. And we tend to look for that in our partner.
So do you
the energy of what we want to be.
Do you look at transits to the ninth divisional chart or what?
No, it's a combination. The trigger that we look for here is a combination, and I won't go into it too deeply here because I'll save it for the course, but it's a combination of the dasha that you are in and how that dasha, those dasha planets are represented in your ninth divisional chart will usually indicate the triggering of relationship during that dasha period.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a Vedic technique that I have found so accurate, actually. Really,
Yeah, I
it's
love
really
that
bang
you
on.
combine both Western and Vedic, and you've taken the best techniques that work in your practice that you've seen work the most. Yeah. What do you think
That's right. Yeah.
for an activation of meeting someone?
Eighth house.
Yeah. What do you think?
I think it's going to be obviously a very intense relationship, eighth house activation for sure. And very sexual. I think there might be that, like I said before, that tantric, bit Pluto-ish kind of energy. I'm just trying to think. I don't think I've actually seen strong, just from recollection, strong activation, but I could be wrong with the eighth house. Have you seen anything? Activation of eighth house or eighth house lord?
I met my husband when Jupiter was transiting the eighth. So I was like,
Right.
I immediately kind of such strong physical attraction it felt. But
Yeah.
when and then I checked the charts of a few people, and I was surprised that quite often I would see Jupiter in the eighth house transit triggering intense relationships, and
Yeah.
almost like a healing happening through those relationships, through the physical intimacy. But yeah, I don't know why. And Victor calls them the
Yeah.
soulmate relationships, like. But yeah, it was. I've never thought of eighth house as it can trigger finding relationship, but this intimacy that it opens up a window, especially if you have problems with intimacy. That's when it.
Well, what's interesting is that the eighth house is connected to divorce as well, and Jupiter transits can actually trigger divorces, which is what happened for you. But they trigger divorces because we get to a point where we realize that we want more than what we have, and that this is not, I'm not being true to myself, because Jupiter naturally correlates to Sagittarius and the ninth house, which is a search for truth.
Yeah.
And so when we find the truth and we realize that what we had is not the truth, and so Jupiter in its transit to the seventh house, for example, seventh house cusp, can bring in wonderful relationships, but it can also trigger divorces because we realize, well, that's not the truth, and that is, So eighth house may have been kind of being divorce based. It's a connection to divorce in the eighth house, and Jupiter there might have brought similar.
I've seen it when people start extramarital relationships, because it is hidden in eighth house, so it is hidden relationship that you start. So it's still a relationship,
Yeah. Eighth house, like you mentioned earlier, just a moment ago, is one of the healing houses, and so sixth house will be sort of the practical healing, diet, exercise, da-di-da-di-da. And 12th house is a healing house that's very, it might be medicine, or it might be sort of miraculous healing, divine healing, that kind of thing. But the eighth house is that tantric kind of stuff and psychological healing. So relationships, I guess, that are triggered through an eighth house transit will tend to have a healing effect, as you illustrated, in a very sexual and psychological way, which is fabulous. Sounds like fun.
Gotta wait another 6 years for it to go and get back there.
Hurry up. Get your Marvin Gaye on, yeah.
Thank you so much, Kesenya. I'm looking forward to this course. It's out. Anyone can check it out with the link below if you're interested, and Kesenya will send it to you. Thank you so much for creating this fascinating course for us. I'm sure it will be very helpful to many astrologers and people that want to learn for themselves how to identify those points, those moments. And thank you, Kesenya. And I'm looking forward again to see what is your next creation, your next teaching.
Thank you for having me, Lada. It's an honor, as always, to be talking to you.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.
Bye.